My name is Shane. For those who are new, welcome back if you're returning. My last video, we were talking about the plea agreement that Micah's family and JP Miller had come to. I wondered if
y'all make sure you go subscribe to Shay. Shay's Oné, I think is how you say it. It's down in the description. Go show her some love. Go show her some love, and let's keep going.
if this was going to be the end of our investigation, but it looks like the investigation with the FBI will continue, and we'll just have to wait to see what comes out in the future. For now, I do have the interview with Regina Ward. We did take a look at a few of the clips in my last video, but today I just wanted to sit back and sort of watch and react to what she had to say and what is going to become of Micah's estate, her charity, and all of that moving forward.
So this week our news team traveled to South Carolina's Grand Strand, where a surprise development in the case of Mica Miller unfolded. A settlement between Miller's family and John Paul Miller and the Solid Rock Church, where he is the pastor. Now this settlement is a global agreement encompassing all actions and all parties to this case, so it is a significant development, not one without controversy, however. But before the settlement was reached, literally just hours before, our media outlet sat down to conduct an interview with the lead attorney for the Francis family, Mica Miller's family, Regina Ward. Here in its entirety is that conversation.
All right, here we go. So this is, again, Regina Ward. She is the one who has been covering Micah's side of the divorce case and all that fun stuff. So here she is to speak.
Down with us today. I know it's a big day. In fact, there's a hearing on this case today. As we're taping this, you're preparing for this hearing in Horry County Probate Court. I wanted to ask you, before we get into the details of this massive case, which we can see here, the work your office is putting into it, I wanted to ask you, you were representing Micah. You were talking to Micah in the days, in the weeks leading up to what happened back in April. Can you tell us anything about those interactions, about her state of mind, her frame of mind? Everything we've been shown indicates a woman who was looking forward, who was excited about this new life that she was embarking on. Can you tell us just anything about her demeanor during those days?
Before Regina speaks, that's kind of what we talked about. It was so odd to see a woman retain a lawyer for a divorce, file for divorce, get baptized shortly before she unalived herself. Like, she did all these steps, the charity work that she was excited for, the school she wanted to start in Africa. I mean, everything, in my opinion, was pointing to a woman who is looking forward to a life beyond this relationship. So before Regina even started to say anything, I just want to say that even as an outsider looking in, I was able to take notice of that as well. What we are concluding happened to Micah doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And what you just said is exactly the impression that I got. In fact, she sat pretty much in that chair you're sitting right now in one of our interactions and talking about it. And she was so happy that she shared with me that she felt that she'd finally found what God's calling was for her life, which was basically the missions, the children in Africa, and education for children who are deprived of an appropriate education.
I mean, did anything ever like devastating happen with the ministry? Did it fall through or something that would like tip Micah over the edge? Because if you're...
Well, literally, isn't that the whole thing that he was trying to say? JP was trying to say that you're not going to be able to go and do that stuff. And then didn't the guy from those missions in Africa, didn't he say that he never even got paid from any of it or anything? Y'all think about it like this. This is hypothetical, but what if she found out that like something had happened and maybe they weren't getting paid and that those bridges were burned, and then she felt like, well, this is my life's calling. That's what she just said. This is my life's calling. This is my life's work. And it's all falling apart right now. You know what I mean? And she's like, and she'd be like in that spot where she's like, I have absolutely nothing left. This is ruined. This is ruined. This is ruined. This is ruined. Damn. Wouldn't that be crazy as hell? I don't know. That's pure speculation. I have no idea. It's completely hypothetical, but that is, I mean, think about that.
Not necessarily like a reason for living, but I guess almost at the same time, like this school seemed to take up a lot of Micah's attention in a positive way. I don't think anything has been said about it falling through. I don't know if it's Anna or Anna, Micah's sister, but she sat down with Regina as well and talked about the charity and stuff, and how she said that her and her family wanted to take that over for Micah. So I can't imagine something fell through.
Let me just say, ecstatic, and it was uplifting to hear her talk about it and to see her so happy about it. And she most assuredly was of, there was no indication of anything, remotely close to a severe depression or anything like that. Of course, anyone that goes through a divorce or separation or an ending of a marriage, there is always, what we call situational depression. In other words, this situation is making me sadder than most. But she was taking responsibility of making sure that she was addressing that with the appropriate therapist and her medical.
I'm not saying it goes for everybody, but typically, when you're in therapy, you're looking for steps forward to work through emotions, problems. I'm not saying, because lots of people have unfortunately unalived themselves. It's another step pointing in that direction.
Gigi, thank you.
Direction of my theory that Micah was trying to take steps in order to have a brighter future, a better future. And one other side note as well, nothing to do with the interview, but why did Micah never leave a suicide note behind? If she was that worried about her family finding her deceased, I don't know, there was like nothing left behind with her family. Called the 911 dispatcher, so she was making phone calls. Why didn't she call anybody else? Because, at that point, you're already at the place where you're going to do it, right? They're not going to have much time to react.
I was so happy for her, because she had finally reached a place where she was done and she was ready to move on, and she just didn't want to fight anymore.
You talked about that plan that she had for her life, the mission work. How central to Mica Miller was faith?
It was the core and the soul of her. Whenever you met Micah, you just felt like you were pulled into the joy that the spiritual word, the word of God, and the teachings of Jesus were principles that she was drawn to, that she was wanting to really abide by in every way possible. And then, which it kind of reminds me of what I thought about at one point after her death was that I know that she was really, really, really struggling with this, I guess, sort of a contradiction, but not really, in the word of the Bible. And she actually made some videos touching on this. And one thing was, God hates divorce. God hates divorce. So what that means is when you're in a marriage is you're supposed to do the work to try to prevent that. She also talked about, forgiveness and praying for our enemies. And when someone does something wrong, is not honest in their dealings with you, or they've said or done something that may hurt you, that you're supposed to be Jesus-like and forgive that person. And not only forgive that person, you're to pray for them. So now you have...
Could it also be the possibility that Micah felt an immense amount of guilt from her first marriage ending in an affair? So she felt like she had to try maybe extra hard in this next relationship to really make it work, because God was already mad at her for being unfaithful the first time. Because it feels like, just like Regina was saying, and I'm glad that she's touching on this, because if she didn't, I was going to bring up Micah's videos where she even talked about herself. God hates divorce. God hates divorce in the Bible, but God also doesn't like abuse. At what point do you, I guess, just not take anymore and not accept anymore? Or when does it become okay to get a divorce? I feel like that's something that Micah struggled on exponentially.
And then the other principle is the principle of being...
And I also forget to mention, if you haven't caught up as well, the reason that JP wasn't leaving her, you have to imagine he's the pastor of the church. How bad is it going to look if he divorces his wife, if it wasn't for like another affair or something, if they just weren't working out? JP even alluded, I believe, to a certain...
That's probably worse than the first one. What? Oh my, can you imagine? I can't divorce you. I don't want people to know that I divorced you. even though I basically had an affair with you on my other wife at the time when I had 5 kids as a pastor. Huh?
Sermon that Sierra brought up, where he was talking about the wife having to lead the husband rather than the husband leaving her. So I don't believe that JP was budging. So Mica was really stuck in a spot where she was unhappy and maybe felt like that she wasn't being treated right, but also was struggling with trying to be a good Christian in her terms.
An obedient spouse as a wife, and the religious teachings that she followed is that the man is the head of the household, and the wife should be subservient to him. But there's a flip side of that. In order for the man to gain his wife, being subservient or to following his lead and guide, is that
you gotta be that dude. You can't be some crazy person. You can't be some weak dude. Like, oh my God, follow me. No. Are you crazy as hell?
The Bible also says that you treat your wife as the bride of Christ, and
Ding.
you're supposed to.
Yup. Handle that. Handle business.
Protect her and do, all that you can to
Protect, provide, do everything you can
to make sure that she flourishes and is nurtured. So she had this difficulty in reconciling. I have a duty as a spouse to follow the lead of my husband and to do the things that he asked me to do, and she did, even the terrible things.
She was also zealously protective of the church, of the Christian faith.
Absolutely.
She didn't want what was transpiring in her life to turn people off to faith, to attending church. And
obviously them speak, but they're making a really good point that I didn't think of, that Mica maybe felt like she had an obligation as the pastor's wife to be the face of it. So it's not going to look very good again if she files for divorce. So I feel like she had a lot of pressure on her.
in fact,
Correct.
Oh, so much focus on the optics.
even argue that she perhaps endured some of this that perhaps no one else would have, because she didn't want people to be turned off or steered away from faith. You think that was...
That absolutely was important to her. She would make the comment or statement that church is not a person, the church is not the man, the church is not the pastor, the church is the people. She absolutely loved that church. She did everything that she could to try to protect the church. She didn't want the church or the congregation, the members, to take this sort of situation and lose their faith. It was incredibly important to her that not interfere. And I think she did a video where she talked about, she apologized for having to keep her circle kind of small, at this time. And that was for a number of reasons. But at the same time, it was like, please continue to believe in God and have your faith and say your prayers and, continue to live and abide by the teachings of our Bible.
It's amazing to see.
There's a saying, people that don't read the Bible read people that read the Bible. Basically saying that, I think, again, speculation, I believe Mica felt a sense of pressure to be a role model. She loved her community, as they're speaking of as well.
Be able to do that when they are the subject of this relentless manipulation and mischaracterization, kind of like a inside the church smear campaign being waged against her.
Yes.
Yet she continued to
Carol, thank you.
Do her best not to cause believers to stumble, basically.
Correct. She was, I would say she was self-sacrificial, that she was willing to sacrifice herself in order to preserve and protect the followers of the word, that they would not get distracted by
Mimi, thank you. Katie, thank you.
the fallible man that may be associated with it. That is not what brings you to church. What brings you to church are the teachings of God and what Jesus, what he represented in this world. And so that was critically important to her to protect that. And I think to some degree, maybe to her own detriment, in that she endured things for a longer period of time. hoping and praying, just like the teachings were, be an obedient wife. That means don't go against your husband, be a good Christian, and that you forgive your enemies. Someone's doing bad, terrible things to you, you're still supposed to forgive them and pray for them. And at the end, when she finally reconciled, I feel like that, God does not want you to stay in marriage just because he hates divorce. God hates abuse. God hates abuse. And just like she said, what do you think that God thinks about that? What do you think he would do about that? In other words, she was laying, what was happening to her. She did not want to be vindictive and lash out and, smear him. She would not allow me as the attorney. What I wanted to do was put a lot of this in the pleadings, and she did not give me permission to do that. She said, I don't want that to happen. I just want to be separated. I just want this to stop. I just want to move on with my life. And at the end of a year, I'll get the divorce. And
Whoa.
And of course, it didn't quite work out that way. And I wish that she would have let me put some of those things in there. But at the end of the day, what it was is she wanted to still protect her husband. Okay. She definitely wanted to protect the church, the name of the church, the congregation, and everything. She didn't want to use it. She had everything she could have used in that situation and chose not to. She said that God doesn't want me to be vindictive. God doesn't want me to lash out. And at the end of the day, what she was referring to is God is the one who will judge, and God is the one who will punish.
She's got that right. Let me ask you.
Wow.
Again, with Micah's faith, I believe she felt that if she was continued to be a good wife, continued to be a faithful wife, that God could see all of the abuse that was done to her. And basically, it would be taken care of for her. She didn't necessarily need to fight the fight. Problem is, if you remain in a miserable situation, most people get to a point where you just can't take it anymore. And I truly think he started getting to her and really started to scare her. The threatening of showing up to her sister's apartment.
Aaliyah, thank you.
Where she was staying, and the 911 phone call we covered from that. The tracking devices, the private investigators. She probably felt like she couldn't even trust the entire community that she was going to church with, and that was clearly important to Micah.
She talked about that way forward, that future for her that she was embracing. You said that she'd reconciled herself.
Yes.
We've all seen that ring camera footage from the day that she died.
Yes.
And I've watched it probably a dozen times, and I see
So have I.
A woman on her way to work, leaving at the time that she would leave to go to work.
Yes.
Starting to get into that new routine of this new chapter of her life. Obviously, something happened after she walked away out of the view of that camera.
That's interesting that she left at the time that she would normally leave if she was heading right to work, but then we see her go right to Dick's. I'm wondering if there was a phone call or some sort of communication between last seeing her on her Ring camera at her apartment to her getting in her car and heading off to work. Because even during her first stop, we see her take off, I believe she had like a collared shirt on, and then when she showed up to the pawn shop, she didn't. Why would you bother even putting your work shirt on if you're not planning on going to work? It just, this is why I was frustrated when I thought that the case would be like over and done with.
Something happened between then and the 911 call that was placed.
Correct.
At the Lumber River Park up in North Carolina. Let me ask you this question. What do you think happened that day?
Well, of course, anything that I would think is speculation, and that is the million-dollar question. I personally believe that answer to that, or some form of answer to that, will be on that cell phone or that Apple Watch that is in the possession of
I just realized my bunnies.
legal authorities. And so we have a court order requiring those things to be released to my office. And they won't release it until they have finished their, quote, investigation, all legal authorities. And so I'm hoping that when I get my hands on those things, that may hold the answer. But I also,
I'm so sorry. I got distracted by the bunny.
I personally believe that that answer to that, or some form of answer to that, will be on that cell phone or that Apple Watch that is in the possession of the legal authorities.
Thank you, by the way, for those who answered the question. This was a clip we reacted to in my last video, and I missed something because I didn't know anybody had possession of an Apple Watch, and you guys clarified that it's Micah's Apple Watch. So thank you for that. But that's what she's talking about in case you don't know.
And so we have a court order requiring those things to be released to my office, and they won't release it until they have finished their quote investigation, all legal authorities. And so I'm hoping that
it's going to go through all legal authorities before it gets to the victim's lawyer. What?
Whoa.
I get my hands on those things that may hold the answer. But I also, you know, from a theoretic sort of a, you know, stance, is that Mr. Miller was very consistent in his, you know, contact with her. He's even made, you know, comments in other news agencies and so forth that he's, I don't know, he sent her 6 or 7 emails. I haven't got my hands on those yet. He made comments that he sent emails to her on the same day that she died, and then realized that there were 2 that she probably didn't get. There are a couple of things that don't add up. There are 2 specific things that he said that were so contradictory, and there's outside evidence to.
I wondered if somebody could get their hands on the emails that he claimed to have sent when he sat down with Rich McHugh in NeesNation. He said, I sent her 6 or 7 emails or whatever, and I wondered if somebody could do a could get a warrant to search for those emails. So Regina's just saying she hasn't even seen those right now. So again, how do you close this investigation when half of the evidence has
it, and to sustain what I'm thinking about particularly, but I would say that I would not be surprised if he made some form of contact with her, because you have to remember that I served. Yes, you have to remember that I served him the separation papers on that day. So he had made a comment.
They have served the separation papers on that day, not 2 days before, like we heard before, on that day.
To me specifically, that, gosh, something must be really wrong, because Regina Ward has been hired on the case. And we know nobody gets Regina Ward unless it's a big case. And I was like, okay, well.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to rewatch this in editing, but did he? I might have to rewatch it now. What did she just say?
That I would not be surprised if he made some form of contact with her, because you have to remember that I served. Yes. The legal authorities. And so we have a court order requiring those things to be released to my office, and they won't release it until they have finished their quote investigation. Mr. Miller was very consistent in his, you know, contact with her. He's even made, you know, comments in other news agencies and so forth that he's, I don't know, he sent her 6 or 7 emails. I haven't got my hands on those yet. He made comments that he sent emails to her on the same day that she died, and then realized that there were 2 that she probably didn't get. There are a couple of things that don't add up. There are 2 specific things that he said that were so contradictory, and there's outside evidence to prove it. You have to remember that I served him the separation papers on that day. So
on that day,
he had made a comment to me specifically that, gosh, something must be really wrong, because Regina Ward has been hired on the case. And we know nobody gets Regina Ward unless it's a big case. And I was like, okay, well, you know, we're not making a big deal out of it. We're just pursuing a separation. So I would not be surprised if he did not start at that moment, the second that he got served, to start berating her with either phone calls or leaving her messages or texting her. You know, basically he weaponized the Bible against her, and I would not be surprised if that happened.
Whoa!
You what?
So, completely hypothetical situation. You have this guy that, Aaliyah, thank you so much for sending the subscriptions. You were so damn sweet. Thank you so much. Oh, we might even get that thing. Imagine this, y'all. You get this guy who's like hyper emotional, you know, calling the police about all kinds of things, like I don't know, maybe like your kid not getting to eat ice cream because he wants his phone or whatever. Something weird like that, right? Like completely hypothetical though. And then you get that hyper emotional, irrational guy gets served those kind of papers and then just decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out of town. I'm just leaving for a few days or whatever. I'm going to go to this event or whatever. I'm going to go to some kind of thing where there's going to be, you know, at least 100 people or so around me. What?
You what?
What? The same again, y'all, this is all hypothetical. This is a hypothetical person I'm talking about. But if that hypothetical person calls the police for all kinds of other stuff, people following him, people doing all this stuff, who knows what, but something like that, it's just, I mean, what am I going to do? Not go out of town? That hypothetical situation would be pretty crazy, wouldn't it? That would be a crazy hypothetical situation. All right, let's continue on. Let's continue on.
Ignore these, by the way. I apologize.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned that weaponization of the scripture, you know, isolating her from family, from friends, the tactics of this man and the totality of this abuse, harassment, stalking. And it wasn't just Mica, was it? There are others who have fallen victim to John Paul Miller, aren't there?
It appears to be. There's definitely a pattern that seems to have emerged here. Whenever you put everything together, it is a consistent pattern that's not only consistent to what Mr. Miller himself has done, but I've been practicing law for almost 20 years, and even though I'm a general practitioner doing, you know, family court, criminal, and personal injury, probably more than 50% of my clients are in the domestic arena. And of that 50% of those clients, I would say probably nearly 50% of those are always coming in complaining about, you know, narcissistic tendencies of their spouse, controlling tendencies of their spouse. They all seem to have the same types of complaints. You know, he took my credit cards, he cut up my credit cards, he turned off my phone, he took my phone, he changed the password on my computer. All of these things to just keep backing and boxing a person in. And it's very prevalent, and it's been overlooked for far too long.
And we're going to talk about some of this as we get into the coercive control angle of this and the potential for legislation here in South Carolina.
Aaliyah, did you send him more? Thank you so much. Gigi's, thank you for those. Gigi's, thank you for even more. You guys are crazy. Thank you so much. TikTok is going ham right now.
That could enhance the current domestic violence statutes. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you this about the current state of play as it relates to the civil cases that are currently pending, custody, probate, but also the potential for additional civil actions, whether from the Francis family, from potential other victims. Walk us through sort of the overview of the lay of the land civilly.
Sure. I do need to straighten out something with the family court case. While Mr. Miller mentioned that they would go pick up the children every single day, they did not have children together. Those were children from his prior marriage. I would be surprised they would have them every day. Usually there's a custody schedule.
Oh,
but
I didn't catch that. Good catch, though. I mean, she is a lawyer.
The family court matter is pending to address a division of the marital estate, and so there are no custody issues. It's also not a divorce. In the state of South Carolina, you can't get a divorce unless you have grounds. Mica certainly had grounds. She had grounds for physical cruelty. She had grounds for adultery, and she chose not to go that route. So it's a family court proceeding. The reason that it's pending now is simply to divide the marital estate and get that part, that was hers.
Wait. So she's saying you can't get a divorce unless, like, something like that happens, you can't just say we have a conflict of differences. Wow.
Well, conflict of what's it? It's not conflict of differences, but it's like irreparable something. What's it called? There's a term for it, but that in most of those cases is enough.
The other action that is pending,
Irreconcilable differences. That's the word. Irreconcilable differences.
of course, is the probate case. And the probate case, of course, is going to deal with her estate. And generally, if a person dies with the will, then her estate would have been distributed pursuant to her wishes in the will. So there was no will. And because of that,
Katie, thank you.
It's going to be divided pursuant to the statutory provisions, which usually says if you're married, it goes to your spouse. And if you're married and have children, it's divided between the two, etc. So basically, the point of that is that he's trying to become the personal representative of the estate, while Sierra is serving as what we call the special administrator of the estate. And so her duties are to collect, the property that may belong to the estate, to pursue particular litigation. At that time, it was specifically for the marital litigation, so that we could keep that going and not be dismissed.
Katie, thank you again.
As far as any other actions, I've been retained for the civil action. The civil action could include multiple types of things or actions, in my opinion. There may be some folks that would disagree with me, but I think that there's a potential wrongful death case. There's not really much on point for that. So I think that it's maybe a novel issue that I'm certainly willing to take up in this case. I can't think of a better fact pattern than this one.
And then just like a few hours later, it's like, nope, everything's gone. Stop protesting everything. We don't want you there. The family doesn't want you there. I heard the family didn't actually say that. Is that true, y'all? That the family, did you guys hear this? I heard the family was like, oh, hell no. We don't agree with any of that stuff. That guy's not our attorney, and we don't agree with it. Is that true? Y'all let me know. I don't know. Just things I heard.
So if there's a case
Leah, thank you.
that's going to test that theory,
Y'all, 2 more subscribers in 10 seconds. Go for it.
this would be it.
It would be it. Also, the other thing that I feel like is a very strong case is called intentional infliction of emotional distress. That is a legal cause of action, a tort claim that exists on the books in the state of South Carolina. And there is indisputably enough evidence to support that.
Intentional infliction of emotional distress is a tort that occurs when one acts in a manner that intentionally or recklessly causes another to suffer severe emotional distress, such as issuing the threat of future harm.
It's a legal cause of action, a tort claim that exists on the books in the state of South Carolina. And there is indisputably enough evidence to support that as well. We also think of assault, and we also think of battery. Okay, most people think of those terms in criminal terms, but it also exists in the civil world. So
absolutely it does.
We can sue for assault. That is, placing a point of fear into someone. There's also a battery, civil battery, and that is an unwanted touch, which we have evidence of that too.
Yep.
So those are some of
Katie, thank you for
the civil actions that could be proposed. The thing is, I believe that Micah was underpaid by the church.
Whoa. But even though she's saying all this stuff, just a couple of hours later, she's like, oh, never mind. No. We all decided that none of this made any sense. We just wanted to wrap things up. Something weird.
So she certainly was not a volunteer because she was paid. She had 7 or 8 positions that were all sorely underpaid. If you extrapolated one of those positions, for instance, I think it was the media director, the range of salary is somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 a year. So I think that there may be a claim against the church for underpayment of wages.
We're going to do a part 2 because we have about 20 more minutes of the interview. So what on earth have they agreed on in trial then? Because it seems like a wrongful death suit might still be coming. I will keep reacting to any more
No, it's not.
Information that comes out regarding this and future cases, as well as part 2 to this interview, because I want to keep hearing what Regina has to say.